didn't. I would love to sit here. I would love to be in the position that Antonia's in and be able to sit here and say, do you know what? No more cuts. There would be no more austerity, no more savings, no more tough decisions. But the reality is, I'm hoping that we'll have a Labour government after me. I'm hoping that I will be one of the people who's in there trying to help make these decisions and help make these decisions in the right way for everybody. So I'm not going to say there's going to be no more cuts, because that's not realistic. We're in a position where we have a deficit and where we have to make the numbers add up. However, I think it's about choices. At the last election in 2010, David Cameron and George Osborne stood there, and the offer that they said to us was, we are going to cut hard, but what we're going to do is we're going to end the deficit by 2015, so that after 2015 we'll be in positive and we can then move on. What's happened in reality? We turned around and we said, actually I don't think you can cut that fast, because what you'll do is you'll wreck public services, you'll wreck the future growth of the country. We'd like to halve the deficit by 2015. What's happened in reality is the deficit's been halved by 2015 because George Osborne has failed every measure that he's set himself. So we're in a position where every single year, every time we've had a review, George Osborne has had to push his figures back and back and back, because the austerity project, as Antonia says, hasn't worked in the way it was intended to work. And I think that's about the choices that you make. So it's about the choices and the places that you make savings. You can't solely cut yourself out of a recession. Right now, and in the last 5 years, frankly, for governments, it's been the cheapest to borrow that it's been for a very long time. We could have sustained the borrowing that we've sustained, but instead of doing that to pay for the failures, instead of doing that, so one big example is income tax receipts are down. So the government's getting less money in from income tax because people are in jobs which are not paying as much. They're in 0-hour jobs, they're in low-paid jobs. That doesn't work for us. So I would have liked to have seen a government which put money into keeping people in jobs rather than keeping people out of jobs. One big example for me, and it's very timely because we've just had news that the government has once again said they aren't going to support it. UK Coal, who employ 1,000 people in Sherwood, in my patch, have been facing financial difficulties, and they went to the government and asked for some short-term support to get them over the global dip in the price of coal, and the government said no, which means there's 1,000 people out of work. There's already half of the employees directly at Thorsby have already lost their job, and that's another 300-400 people sat on the dole. That's 300-400 people not paying income tax and instead claiming money back from the government, and that doesn't work for me. So I think we could have made choices which help grow our economy instead of shrinking our economy, which kept people in work, which kept people off of the benefits. I think as well, you say we're beginning to come out of it, but actually the reality is all of the independent monitors, the Institute for Financial Studies, the Office of Budget Responsibility, have said the plans which were announced in the budget last week show that in the next 2 years cuts will be at least twice as hard as anything that we have seen so far. So we're not really coming out of it at all. Actually, the worst is yet to come. Post-election, we're going to really start to see some difficult questions. Just in terms of 0 hours as well, I appreciate what you're saying, Gary, in terms of, if it works for people, but actually by and large it doesn't work for people. People don't have a choice. And I just want to tell you, my brother's on a 0-hour contract. He works for Boots. So Boots, a good company with, in theory, a good reputation in this town. My brother's been working on a 0-hour contract for 2 years, sorry. He hasn't worked much at all since Christmas, and the fact is he sits by his phone every day to wait for whether he is able to work tomorrow, whether he's going to have a pay slip at the end of the week. And that doesn't work for people. That doesn't give you the stability to build a future, to build a family. And so, yes, I'm sure there are some instances, students, etc., where a 0-hour contract might work, but actually for the bulk of people it doesn't, and I think for that reason we've got to take action. The question, obviously, just to come back to the actual question, I hate to be radical, was about cuts disproportionately affecting women, and it's a massive problem. Women have taken the bulk of, women have been hit roughly 6 times harder by the decisions that have been made by this government, so that's changes to child tax credits, that changes to working tax credits, that's women being hit harder by bedroom tax. Women also take on the bulk of where public services are not living up to the means. It's usually women who pick up the fall in that. So the fact that childcare places are at a record low means that there's a whole generation of women who are not only looking after grandchildren, because otherwise their kids aren't going to be able to stay and work, they're also looking after elderly parents because our care system is failing. Our care system is not taking on as much responsibility as it needs, and so there's a whole generation of women who are just being hit from every angle and who are probably on low pay in the first place.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, that's your 5 minutes.
Sorry.
Okay, so